Back, boxing fans, to a lunchtime boxing talk. Obviously this weekend we had two big cards, Canelo Alvarez, Jaime Munguia, which turned out pretty much like people expected. Munguia did come out and did show a lot of energy and a lot of heart, but obviously he was just on a different level. And then of course yesterday, a very good card from Japan, 4 world title fights, 4 Japanese world champions. Inoue obviously was fighting Nery for his undisputed title, defending undisputed, which, you know, in this day and age, while we get a lot of undisputed champion, it's very rare that one of these champions actually defends their undisputed. And it looks like he's going to be defending his 122-pound undisputed titles for quite some time. Apparently, we will see what happens, of course, moving forward. But post-fight yesterday, it does look like that's the direction they are moving. The Nery fight, obviously, if you are Japanese, you understand the history behind it. You understand the anger and hate towards Nery, who beat Shinzuki Yamanaka and obviously got caught once for using PEDs. And then the second time, much like Ryan Garcia, came in overweight and was given a lifetime ban by the Japanese Boxing Commission. They rescinded that to allow Inoue to beat the crap out of him, which is what everybody was hoping for and anticipating. Nery, a 2-weight world champion, always known as a hard puncher, a southpaw, not the slickest fighter, but obviously a guy that is dangerous in his own right. He came out, caught Inoue early when Inoue was still not quite flowing, not quite in his rhythm, dropped him with a nice counter left, and shocked the boxing world. All I can say is people were aghast. They did not expect that to happen, especially with some of the underneath conversation going on about the last big fight that happened in the Tokyo Dome, where Buster Douglas upset everybody by beating Mike Tyson. And people were speculating, wondering if Nery could duplicate that kind of performance against Inoue. And in the first round, it looked like we just might get that. And considering we've been getting a lot of upsets recently, people thought this might actually be the third, right? You know, things happen in threes. But needless to say, Inoue did what champions do. He bounced back in the second round, got on top, dropped Nery with a very good short left counter, and then went on to dominate and destroy him in the 6th round. I just showed the ESPN YouTube highlights to one of my coworkers, a girl from Swaziland, and she's not a big boxing fan, but I said, you know, yesterday was very exciting. I watched 4 hours of boxing, and she was like, what? 4 hours of boxing? So I showed her the highlights, and she was like, damn, he's good. So, you know, it just shows you, even casual sports fans, when they watch Inoue, are pretty excited by the way he goes about doing what he does. Some of those short punches he was landing yesterday, the 2 lefts, both very short, especially the second one, and then the right hand that ended the fight, also very short punch. This was not a guy swinging from the fences, heaving giant hooks, you know, from left field, trying to get as much momentum and, you know, energy behind the punch as possible. These were really short punches, making me reminisce of Bruce Lee's 1-inch punch. It was kind of similar to that. Very good punches, very accurate and right on target, and ended up leading him to obviously continue to be the undisputed 122-pound world champion of the world. Now we look forward to what he's going to do next. Post-fight, his 2 sanctioning body mandatory, Sam Goodman, who obviously the haters are going to criticize Inoue for fighting him, but you know, when you're undisputed champion, you have potentially 4 mandatory opponents, and if that's the case, you're going to be fighting mandatory opponents and not necessarily the name opponents people would want you to fight. I saw Mike Montero and several other people talking about how there's no real great fighter at 122 pounds for Inoue to fight. And then they were talking about, you know, even Dante's Boxing Nation was saying, you know, he should be like Bud Crawford and move up in weight and challenge himself. The irony with that situation is Bud Crawford, by moving to 154, is actually duplicating Inoue, who's already moved up to 4 weight divisions. If Inoue moves up one more time, it's going to be his 5th weight division, putting him in elite company for less than 10 fighters in boxing history who've been able to win titles in 5 weight classes. So that in itself would be quite the accomplishment. And obviously that is something he's probably going to do sometime in the future. But I don't understand people's necessity to push him out of the division. You don't see anybody really telling Tank Davis to go to 140, right? His 3rd weight division that he already fought in once and fought 2 fighters from that division already. So it's not as if it would be that big of a jump theoretically, but nobody's really telling him to do that. So I don't understand why people feel the need to make Inoue go to 126. Currently at 126, there are no big star fighters. There's nobody at 126 that has such a name behind them, such accomplishments, that they could drag Inoue to the United States in a big fight. Every single one of those would be a B-side to Inoue, would need to go to Japan to fight him, because none of them are big draws in the US. None of them, whether we're talking about Lopez, Robsy Ramirez, Raymond Ford, Ray Vargas, Fonduro, whoever, whatever fighter you can think of who presently fights at 126 pounds, none of them are even close to the star that Inoue is. And the irony with this whole narrative is, why are people so quick to want him to move up to take on somebody that in truth hasn't really even proven anything? Nobody that he could even get a lot of respect for beating. If he moves up to his 5th weight division and beats any of those guys, the people that are hating on Inoue and hating on his accomplishments won't have any reason to say, wow, now that's an accomplishment. That should have been their response to him beating Stephen Fulton, especially with all the build-up towards that. But they didn't even have that feeling after he beat Fulton. Then they talked about how Fulton wasn't that great. You know, who did he beat? Didn't have any power. You know, all the kind of criticisms and negativity we see boxing fans throw out consistently when they don't want to give someone respect. The truth is, I think Inoue should stay at 122. The biggest possible fight for him coming up in the future is a fighter that's presently sitting at 118 pounds, and that would be Junto Nakatani, the hard-hitting Thomas Hearns-esque Japanese fighter who is now a 3-weight world champion in his own right. A guy that's right now in a division at bantamweight that is packed full of Japanese world champions, all of whom potentially he may fight somewhere this year and early next year to try to duplicate what Inoue did at 118, which is become an undisputed champion. If he's able to do that, or at least, you know, marginally unify some titles and show that he is leaps and bounds above everyone else, and then moves up to 122 to challenge Inoue, that fight would be gigantic in Japan. 2 superstar Japanese fighters matching up. It would be the equivalent of Thomas Hearns, Sugar Ray Leonard. Obviously, American fans are not going to have the same feeling about it as Japanese fans would. But at this point, who cares? Why does Inoue need to worry about what what American boxing fans have to worry about? It's kind of like saying that, you know, Tank Davis needs to worry about what Japanese fight fans are saying. Of course he doesn't, because he's probably not hearing it. It's not really having a definitive impact on his life or his career. He's doing himself in the States. As long as American boxing fans are buying his product and supporting him, what else does he need to worry about? He doesn't need UK fans or Asian fans to support him. If they do, all the better. Obviously, that means now you become a global star. You get more money just from people buying your fights globally, and obviously that's a great thing for his career, but it's not a necessity. Right now, Inoue just sold over 55,000 tickets, or 50,000 in the Tokyo Dome, in a huge event, which was a smashing success and a very, very entertaining fight to boot, right? Potentially his next fight is going to be against unified champion Sam Goodman. sorry, not unified champion, but two divisional mandated opponent. He's the mandatory for two of the sanctioning bodies. I can't remember which ones they are off the top of my head. I think WBO and maybe WBA. And he's obviously a top 3 fighter by one of the other sanctioning bodies as well. So by beating Sam Goodman in September, which is what they were talking about post-fight, Sam Goodman was also seen talking to Bob Arum, who said, yeah, we got your number. Okay, we'll get in touch with you. That does look like the most likely scenario, that Inoue is going to be fighting Sam Goodman, who is his mandatory for 2 sanctioning bodies. You fight him, and now you have freedom. You deal with 2 sanctioning body mandatories, and then hopefully after that, you can maybe go to Saudi Arabia and fight somebody like MJ Akhmedov, which hardcore boxing fans will be super excited about. MJ was obviously an Olympic medalist, a guy that was a unified world champion, a guy whose only loss was coming off of an injury and a very competitive split decision loss. So it'll be interesting to see how he stylistically would match up with Inoue. Both of them are power punchers, both are fast, both very good technical fighters as well, with good amateur pedigree. It may not be the kind of fight that American boxing fans get excited about, because they probably don't know much about MJ Akhmedov anyway. But if what we hear is true, and Saudi Arabia is interested in bringing Inoue to Saudi Arabia, potentially to fight a Muslim fighter like Akhmedov, that would be a great fight. And obviously it would be great to see Inoue go to a different part of the world to defend his undisputed titles against another top level fighter. And then in the meantime, we can have Junto Nakatani do what so many people expect him to do, which is dominate the bantamweight division. Currently, you have Takai, who just upset one of the Australian brothers yesterday on the undercard of Inoue's card. You had Inoue's brother, who made his second title defense of his WBA title on the Inoue undercard. And then, of course, you have Nishita, who just beat Emmanuel Rodriguez, a 2-time bantamweight champion, to become a world champion in his own right. I would love to see Junto Nakatani fight Inoue, maybe in September, on the undercard of Sam Goodman. And if Junto Nakatani was able to unify against Inoue's brother, and then possibly think about jumping up to take on the older brother, the monster at 122, what a storyline that would be for the Japanese media and the Japanese press. It's exactly the kind of scenario you need to sell a fight, especially a fight of that magnitude. 3-weight, unified bantamweight champion, just knocked out Inoue's brother to unified titles, moves up to his 4th weight division to try to beat the monster and take over the reins as the best Japanese world champion in boxing today. I mean, that shit sounds fantastic. It would be a great fight. And I definitely think Junto Nakatani is by and far the most dangerous opponent for the monster, from 118 to 126 pounds, possibly even 130 pounds. Obviously, once we get to 130, now we're talking about much bigger people, so they have a lot of size advantage that benefits them. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're better fighters, but at a certain point, you know, being naturally bigger does help you win fights. I know some people are talking about potentially Inoue fighting Tank Davis. Literally, Sean Zettel yesterday in post-fight video was talking about that. And this shit's ridiculous, because he was talking to Tank Davis's frontman. What's his face? I'm sure you all know who I mean. The guy that caps for Tank Davis like crazy. And even he was saying, what do you mean? What's the fucking point? Inoue's a superstar. He doesn't need to come to America. And he doesn't even need to worry about fighting Tank Davis. He's a star in his own right. And him jumping up to 135 or potentially 130 to take on Tank Davis would just be a bad career move. And the point is, the same people wanting Inoue to jump up to fight Tank Davis at 130, if you suggested to them Tank Davis jumping up to 147 to take on Bud Crawford, they would call you all kinds of names. They would lose their shit. Yet, what's the difference? Inoue has already went through 5 weight divisions, For him to go to 130, that would be literally his 7th weight division. Tank Davis to go to 147, that would be literally his 4th weight division. So it's okay to expect Inoue to jump up 7 weight divisions to take on one of the most dangerous fighters in boxing, just so he could get beat, so you could say, look, he's a hype job. As if that's the real story. Whereas you couldn't expect Tank Davis to jump up 4 weight divisions to take on Bud Crawford. Because you also know that if he did that, he would most likely get his ass beat, and then people would call him a hype job. That's why there's weight classes. That's why I don't expect fighters to do ridiculous things like jump through multiple weight divisions. I heard recently, I think post Canelo's fight card, that the next potential big fight for Canelo, maybe in September, I guess it depends on what happens with Crawford's fight in California, could be Crawford versus Canelo Alvarez, which theoretically is a great fight. Obviously it's a huge fight, probably the biggest fight that can be made in boxing. But we also need to be realistic. Bud Crawford doesn't need to go up so many weight divisions to take on Canelo Alvarez. His legacy is already cemented. He is a future Hall of Famer, just like Canelo Alvarez is. And when Canelo said that he doesn't really have anything to win, that it's basically a lose-lose scenario, he wasn't lying. If he beats Bud Crawford, no one's going to give him credit, because he obviously pulled a guy that just fought at welterweight all the way up to 168. And if he loses, oh my God, the world will end for sure. For Bud Crawford, obviously if he wins, he joins that group of Floyd Mayweather-esque all-time greats. If he loses, people are going to say, oh, you know, he went for greatness. Obviously, nobody expected him to jump up so many weight divisions and win. So for him, it's a no-brainer. For Canelo, it's a no-censor. But let me know what you think. Leave your comments below. Thanks for watching.